You all can hear me, all right?
Yeah.
I'm going to take this.
That's actually for the tape recorder.
Okay, let's put it over here then.
Oh,
That
watching
way
it.
I
Okay.
won't trip over it.
Sure.
Okay, and plus I won't be speaking in front of it because I may move up and down the aisle a little bit.
Okay, but I'll let you know if you're not being recorded.
Okay, very good. Steer it at me. Okay, so I am going to speak about how the computer and all of the variations that come out of the computer have changed interpersonal communication. And we're going to speak about the job interview and the college interview and the school interview. Private schools and graduate schools are still using interviews quite a lot. Colleges, oddly enough, are beginning to not use interviews as much. If you right now have a kid who's applying to the University of Massachusetts or the University of Connecticut, you can't get an interview. They just won't do it. Why is that? The main reason the interview at the college level is beginning to be discounted is because most of them are so mediocre. They just don't get much good information from them. And there's two reasons. One is nobody knows how to be interviewed, and very few people know how to interview well, to glean the information that you should be gleaning to make a decision to move forward in a way that makes sense for the college and for the student, because really the interview is to evaluate both of those. As I say, I'm going to talk about interpersonal communication. We're going to use the interview as a model, but really all interpersonal communication, all of your important conversations can utilize a lot of this information. And preparing yourself for the important communications in life is really the business that I run. How to help people get ready to enter into a conversation like that, know what it is they're going to present, and come out of it having influenced the other person in the way that they had hoped to influence them. My argument is that interpersonal communication is the backbone of business across America and across the world, but I'd even take it a step further and say it is the backbone of society since the beginning. For an example, hi Eve. Hey, you're looking pretty good. New fig leaf? You remember me, Sam, the serpent? The tree? Yeah. How about a little knowledge? So you got my idea. From the very beginning, interpersonal communication has been about trying to influence a decision. Now, Eve wasn't too ready. She made the wrong decision. However, we've got the same problem throughout communication when we don't prepare, when we just walk into it and try to wing it. And most people go into job interviews or school interviews with pretty much the same mentality. How can I prepare? I don't know what they're going to ask. I just got to go, and when they ask the question, I'm going to do my best to wing it. If you do ask people, what kind of advice would you give someone who is going to be interviewed? They very frequently get the same kind of advice. Smile, firm handshake, good eye contact, dress for success. You've all heard that, those list of platitudes before, right? But that will help at the very, very beginning. It will help you get in the door. It'll help you during the chit-chat. But then they're going to ask that first question. Many of you, I'm assuming, have interviewed people yourselves before. What's the first question you most generally ask?
Why do you want to work here?
Why do you want to work here? The other one, there's a cousin that often is asked more often than that, but that's number 2 most frequently asked first question. What do you think the other one is? It's really less of a question and more of a demand. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Okay? Those 2 questions are the beginning of most interviews. I'd even go to the point of saying, in fact, it's really the same question, if the interviewer knows how to steer it correctly, right? The way politicians, they never answer the question asked, they answer the question they want to answer. So we're going to talk about why is all of this changing? Why are our young people, but also many of us who are getting older now, also not very good at interpersonal communication? And these are the things that we're using for communication. This whole list. Can you guys read this in the back of the room?
Yeah.
Good. I won't read it at you. But these kinds of things have gotten to the point where I very often see 2 kids sitting on a bench in high school, and they're texting each other. Stuff they could say to each other. But what's really fascinating about that is that there's what you mean is not in the words that you say. Most people come out of a job interview, if they did any preparation at all, and they go, how'd it go? Well, I should have said, right? And what we plan to say and what actually gets said are oftentimes very different from each other. That is if you even plan. So my point is that since we do pretty much know that the first question is going to be most likely an open-ended question. I'll skip to that in a minute. The open-ended question is going to probably be, why do you want to work here? Or tell me a little bit about yourself. Or if it's a college interview or a grad school interview, what makes you think that XYZ is a good college for you? It's pretty much the same question. If the interviewer can start off, the interviewee can start off by saying, well, listen, I've researched your company. I know an awful lot about you and your competitors, and it seems to me that everything I've been doing in my life prepares me to come to work for you. And if you knew a little bit more about that, I think you'd understand what I mean. Would you like to hear? Yes? Now I'm back to tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay? Your response to that first question really needs to be 3 or 4 achievements in your life which lead towards this position. Okay? But all of these achievements you want to set up as little success stories. And you want to set them up as a goal set, and then the analysis that you need to do to figure out what skills I need in order to achieve that goal. Then you practice, and you practice, and you practice until you are ready, and then you go and you achieve. This could go right from the very beginning. I wanted to buy a bicycle when I was 10 years old. So I set up a lemonade stand on the corner of the street in the golf course, and I started making money. And the more I got into that, then they asked me if I wanted to become a caddy. And after I became a caddy, I made enough money. I bought my first bicycle, and I got my first job that I had to ride the bike for, which was my newspaper route. And right, you see how we're building the analysis, the preparation, and then the achievement. And we can move from that into the kid that says, I wanted to make the captain of the basketball team. That was my goal. But I'm 4'5" and I can't dribble very well. And I can't shoot worth a damn. So I figured out I better learn. I'm so short, I'm never going to be a center. I'm going to probably be a point guard. I better learn how to dribble. I better learn how to do an outside shot. So I got my parents to buy a basketball hoop. I went and got a basketball, and for 2 years I stayed out there in the driveway. When I could make a 30-foot jump shot, 8 out of 10, then I decided to try out for the basketball team. By that point, I knew how to dribble pretty well, and I eventually became captain of the team. Great. You see how the analysis and the practice is a part of the way you want to tell these stories. Now, ideally, you won't just tell them chronologically. Ideally, you can figure out some skill that is at the backbone of your successes in your life, that these 3 or 4 achievements you're going to use demonstrates. And you can start the story with, you want to know about me? Here's a good one. I had a young man one time who said, I got it, I got my story. So I said, okay, let's rehearse it. He said, I'm a hurdler. He says, now you probably saw on my resume that I was a 300-meter intermediate hurdle champion for my school league for 2 years in a row. But that's really not a track story. It's about who I am as a person. Because I have pretty serious ADD. We found that out when I was in 5th grade. And I tried the various medications, but I didn't like the way they made me feel. I was jumpy, my appetite was weird, so the drug thing wasn't going to work for me at all. I then found out that what I need to do is develop technique. And that's just like the hurdles. When you're running down the track as a hurdler, what you need to learn how to do is fold your legs over the hurdle and then throw them back down on the track. Your head should not go up or down. It should just stay even. And your legs fold and go down, fold and go down. And that's technique. I had to learn the same kind of technique to get over the hurdle of ADD. So I learned I would put my goals on the mirror every morning, what I was going to do that day. And I'd have them all up there. And at the end of the day, I'd come home and I would move the ones that I accomplished over to the right-hand side, and the ones that I hadn't accomplished stayed there on the left. And just having those goals every day on the board was the technique that I needed to overcome my ADD. Another problem he said I had wasn't very good at foreign language. Memorizing long lists of vocabulary, that just wasn't going to fit with who I am. But I'm a decent musician, and I really like music. So I found a whole bunch of songs. I was having a hell of a time with Spanish vocabulary and getting through the Spanish course I needed to graduate. So I learned a whole bunch of Spanish songs that had all the vocabulary words that I needed to know. And from my music strength, that was the technique that I needed to overcome passing Spanish and get my high school diploma. And then he had a couple of others again, but it was always the hurdle that he had cleared, which he was demonstrating with his various achievements. gets to the end of that story and says, so that's why I say I'm a hurdler. What else would you like to know? Now you're cheering for this guy right there, right? The interesting thing about this is most interviewers, and I would even take this now, going back to the larger interpersonal conversations, we're going to see how this interview model fits other kinds of conversations that you might have. But most interviewers make up their mind in the first, how many minutes?
3.
Seconds, 3 minutes. Anybody want to go for more than that? Once in one of these presentations, I heard somebody say 10 minutes. I don't believe it. Most interviewers make up their mind in the first 1 to 3 minutes generally, sometimes seconds. We can get into where in the interview, when does the interview officially start, right? But at any rate, it's in that first few minutes. So the answer to the open-ended question, which is coming at the beginning, is when the interviewer decides, I'm pulling for this one, I can't get out of this interview soon enough, right? How much longer do I have to pretend like I'm interested? The interviewer will spend the rest of the interview proving him or herself right, okay? So I always tell the interviewee, don't be thinking it's over at that point. There is the possibility to change their mind if you've tanked it. Rare, but it is possible. But more importantly, the interviewer is not going to make the decision alone most of the time. Usually there's going to be a small committee, there's going to be 3 or 4 people, there might be other interviews that you have to do. But they're going to fill out a form. And the form is going to have certain criteria on it that the interviewer is supposed to rate you on, and then that report is going to the committee, whether it's a school interview or even a job interview. So what you need to do for the rest of the interview is arm your interviewer with the ammunition that he or she needs to present you as the candidate that they're looking for. So those criteria are rather critical. I'm going to talk about the criteria in just a minute. The one thing that I wanted to show, though, is this here. The manner in which you say it. And this is why I think it's very, very important for us always to realize in any important conversation that you're going to engage in business in particular, prepare and rehearse. And I say rehearse, and that's the step that most of us skip, right? You're getting ready to go into an important meeting. You may make some notes, but do you rehearse it, and do you rehearse it out loud? I think it's particularly important. I was a high school theater teacher, as Dean mentioned, for 20 years. I spent an awful lot of time trying to teach people how to present an idea and make it believable. Think about this. Most of you have kids, right? You walk into the living room, and the 2 kids are sitting on the sofa, and there's a glass of spilt milk on the floor. And you say to them, who did it? And they both answer exactly the same. What do they say? Not me. And yet mom knows who did it, right? The words are the same, but the manner in which you say it tells us the truth and tells us whether or not we can trust the person. We had an example earlier today. The reason there's no aces in here is because, like, well, maybe there's an ace in there. I don't know. Right? I'm just picking on you. But that concept of how you do it tells us whether or not we believe it. Tells us whether or not we're influenced by it. You can say all the right words, but if you don't present it with confidence, we kind of wonder if you know what you're talking about. All of a sudden, it just doesn't really sound like you know what you're talking about because you're just a little bit nervous, and it starts to get a little hesitant, or your voice kind of crunches. You can't believe anything I'm about to say at that moment. It's not what you say, it's how you say it that is so critical. So how do you achieve that? I would never take a group of high school kids and say, here's a script, we're going to perform this tomorrow. Right? They'd all look at me like I was crazy, plus they'd freak out. Confidence is one of the most critical things you need when you're going into any important conversation, whether it's an interview or an evaluation of an employee. That's a very important one, by the way. How do you best present this, and how do you get confident in your material? There's only one way. Practice. Right? Practice it, practice it, practice it. Until you believe not only that it's the right thing for you to say, but that you know how you're going to say it and how you're going to present it so that you're comfortable with the message. And that's how you build trust, which is what a job interview is all about to begin with. These conversations, whether they're in-house presentations, a marketing pitch, or an outside presentation that you're making to another company, a sales interview, and the job interview, all of these require this kind of preparation. I would make the point that the structure will change a little bit. In the job interview is the most conversational of these presentations, but it's also the most elusive. See if I can write this upside down. Can you guys even read that in the back of the room? Yep. Okay. Left-handed and off to the side. In-house presentations are probably the most formal. So you've got to give a presentation, and you're going to stand up and you're going to kind of go through the information. We go from the formal, and there are tons of formats that you can find on the internet, or you probably got them in books that you've used in the past, to how to put these together. My point is that as we go down this list, it goes from the formal to the conversational. It goes from the where you can get the most information as to how to do this. You can join Toastmasters or take a public speaking class, and you can learn how to do these kinds of presentations. The further we go down the list, the more informal it gets, and the more elusive it gets. Who has ever attended a seminar before on how to do a job interview? You have? Yeah. Amazing. The first time anybody's raised their hand to that question. But I'm terrific. I'm very glad to hear that. And at the end, if you have any suggestions for me, I'd love to hear them. But this concept, we don't teach it. We don't teach it in schools. Colleges are beginning to stop doing them because they're so mediocre. So we're learning less and less and less how to communicate in that fashion. Plus, if you remember my previous slide, we've got kids who are texting each other and don't even know how to talk to each other. So you need to get, as you prepare any of these types of meetings, you need to do the same kind of preparation that I'm going to talk about for the rest of this. So the structure of these kind of meetings. And from my previous chart, the job interview is the one that follows this the most closely. The in-house presentation, you need less of the stuff at the top and more of the stuff at the bottom. Okay? With the job interview, it's pretty straight through. So the beginning, the preamble, this is what I call the chit-chat. This is the, do you have any trouble finding the place to park? How was your trip down here, et cetera, et cetera. You sit over there. I'm going to sit over here. I'm going to make a few notes. Please don't get nervous. Now, why would you like to come to work for us? Boom, open-ended question. We're in part A. All of the information that you generally get from people about dress for success, handshake, eye contact, blah, 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 helps you for this, but that's it. Right here, you've got to have the story of my life figured out as a series of successes, 3 to 5 achievements with a theme that matches the need. Okay? This part, the body, the middle, in the presentation, the in-house presentation or the marketing pitch outside presentation, this is where a majority of the information is going to go. The benefits to the client organization, to the people that we're talking to. In the job interview, I call it T&A, targets and arrows. And I'll go over what that means in just a second. Questions. 3/4 of the way through the interview, most of the time the interviewer says, "Oh, I've learned a lot about you, Mark. It's been great getting to know you. What questions do you have for us?" Back in 5th grade, you probably had a teacher who told you there are no such thing as dumb questions. Not true. If you ask at this point, "Geez, how many vacation days do I get?" you will have a very short tenure at that company. If you ask, "What's the salary?" at this point, probably not a good idea. Right? You really should not ask any questions about how you benefit at this point. You should ask about ways that your skills can benefit the company. You should also not ask anything that you can easily find out by a 5 to 10 minute search of the company on the internet. Right? If you show up at a college interview and you say, "By the way, how many students go to Williams?" all you have done is demonstrate that you didn't even look at their website. You've demonstrated your ignorance. So instead, we want to do the opposite. We want to demonstrate our intelligence. We want to demonstrate that we've gone to the internet, we've looked for the answer to the question, we couldn't find it, and we developed a question that does make sense, and that it would benefit me and would benefit the company that I'm going to work for in the future. Questions. We were talking earlier about the quality of questions. Most people in an interview, when you get to that point and you say, do you have any questions for me? At least 50% are going to say, oh, no, you've actually answered all my questions. Because it's like the horse, right? It's now seen the barn. Whew, we're off. We're out of here. I made it. I survived. What a mistake. What a lost opportunity. Today, knowledge is nowhere near as important as the quality of your questions. Because you can ask anything. Siri, where do I find... Siri, where do I find flowers in Bennington, Vermont? Doesn't it?
Okay, check it out.
And then here are the 4 flower shops in Bennington on Main Street. One on, three on North Street and one on Main Street. I was going to visit my mom. Mother's Day, right?
Yeah.
So you can get, if you can ask a good question, how do I avoid capital gains tax? The answer's in your pocket. So being able to ask good questions is one of the things you need to demonstrate in an interview. I would suggest you spend some time researching the questions you want to ask and write them down on a card and put them in your pocket or your purse. And when the interviewer says, do you have any questions for us? Yeah, and this is really important to me, so I wrote them down. Even if you remember them, pull it out. Why?
Preparation.
Yeah, my words demonstrate, but show, yes.
The person with the paper runs the conversation.
Well, that's another good point. At this point, they're giving you the conversation anyway. But you're demonstrating that you did your research, that you're not the kind of couch potato they don't want to hire. Okay? Closing. Interviews. Some interviewers are terrible at knowing when it's over. And then going on and on and on. You need to be able to stand up, put your hand out. Thank you very much. I knew so much about you before I came in. Now I know a little bit more, and I'm really excited to be here. And then you have to ask, how many of you in sales? Couple? Yeah? What do you need to do right now?
Ask for an order.
Yeah, closing question, right? We all know the Girl Scout is the best salesperson in the world because instead of giving you 1,000,000 benefits, she says, you want to buy some cookies? Right? At the end of an interview, you have to do the same thing. You have to say some kind of a closing question which advances the argument. Now, you can't come out, let's say, take the college interview. You can't come out and say, by the way, am I going to get into Harvard? You know, the interviewer doesn't know the answer to that question and isn't prepared to answer it and is probably a little ticked off if you ask that stupid of a question, right? But what can you ask? And this is where you have to think on your feet. You have to think about what during this interview has been earned. What can I say? I've learned an awful lot about your school today. I've learned an awful lot about you personally. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you've learned enough about me so that you can make a positive report about me to the committee. You might be able to get away with that one. That's a good one. And you have to figure out what you've earned in the process. Okay, that's sort of the overview. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped targets and arrows. I want to come back to that. The body of the interview. This is the point where you're going to help the interviewer fill out the form to advance you at the company. And usually you can figure out what are the criteria that you would use if you were the other person. Now, this is in a job interview. In a sales interview, what are the criteria by which they're going to make the decision to buy mine or the other guy's? What are the criteria? And if you do your research, and it shouldn't be that difficult, you can figure it out. In a job interview, work ethic, decision-making, judgment, initiative. Look at the job description. They've written them down for you. Look at the website. Figure out what's going on in that community. So then once you figure out those criteria, and I would suggest somewhere between 5 and 10, probably don't need any more than that, then you want to develop for yourself a little teeny story, a bullet that you can write down on a 3x5 card, which will remind you of what is my best hard-working story. What's my best decision-making story? So you catalog those, and those are like little arrows you've got in your quiver. You're walking in there to have this presentation. It's like going on a hunting trip, right? When you see the elephant, you pull out your hard-working story, bam! And you used your hard-working story on the hard-working target. And you have your decision-making story, and you use that on your decision-making target. And you steer the question similar to what we talked about at the beginning if you get a slightly different open-ended question than the one you've prepared for. And that way you know that you have the ammo that they need to make a good decision, and you're prepared to give them the information they need and steer the conversation so that a bad interviewer doesn't leave you giving a bad interview. Right? Okay. Wrapping it up. Closing. before any of these important conversations, prepare. Prepare is the content. Figure out what the content is, figure out what the criteria is, figure out what your success stories are, and then rehearse. And I would recommend that you get somebody who is a coach to help you rehearse so that you can do it live and force you to do it out loud, and you'll get feedback. I've been a wrestling coach for years and years and years, and I know very well that I can explain to a high school kid as much as I want to how to do a push-up. They're not going to do them. Just like you, if I say, rehearse your interview, you're not going to do it. Until the coach is standing over there you and going, come on, come on, yeah, you can do another, yes, you can do another. Oh, by the way, get your butt down. You got your butt way up in the air. You got to flatten your back. You want your arms coming in this way, not going out that way. To make sure they're doing it right. Think about it. If you won this little lottery that we're having, it's no longer for the money for the bar up at the public house. It's to get to bat in the bottom of the ninth in a game with the Red Sox against the Yankees. You're going to be up at the plate. And it's tie score, by the way. And you're about to see your first 95-mile-an-hour fastball coming right down over the plate. Are you just going to walk in there and do it? No. You're going to go to the batting cage, right? You're going to see a couple of them come by. The first one, you're probably going to jump a half a mile away. And you're going to have to walk up to it slowly until you can get used to that ball coming in. And then, if you're really smart, you'll get a coach who'll tell you that elbow's got to be up, or the way you're swinging, you're not stepping. Whatever the little technicalities are that you're not going to just fall into on your own. Today, it is so hard to get an interview, you can't afford to blow it. That's the most difficult thing, is getting your resume in front of the person who says, oh, let's take a look at that one. Because they're just getting inundated with resumes. Getting the interview is tough, but scoring on the interview you can do if you know how. If you know how to prepare. And it's the preparation and the rehearsal which will earn you the confidence so that you can make the presentation and the audience will say, I believe that. I trust that. It makes sense to me. And that's how you get hired. That's how you influence people to make the decisions that you're hoping they'll make. You have to know what it is they're looking for and then make sure you can deliver it in person. Are there questions? Yes?
Are your high school students accepting this, or are they going on Facebook and all this kind of stuff?
Well, they're going to continue going on Facebook, and they're going to continue sitting next to each other and texting each other.
Can you tell them you don't put that stuff on Facebook because employers are looking at that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We do spend an awful lot of time. In fact, a lot of schools are using guidance counselors to basically help kids undo what they've already put on the internet that they shouldn't have put on the internet. Right? The keg stand at the frat party. Let's get rid of that one. Right? The key, though, is I think the key is not to say don't use this stuff. Right? The world they live in, they cannot afford to be computer illiterate. They need to use this stuff, but they also need to use this stuff. They need to know how to speak. They need to know how to stand on their own 2 feet and present a good oral argument. Think about it. What do we teach in high school? When I taught at high school, there were 19 trimesters required in English and in history, where you're going to learn to write a five-paragraph essay until you're blue in the face, right? How many on public speaking? Maybe the school has 1 elective. How about the interview? Nothing. Nothing. And yet that conversation has more to do with the success in your life than your ability to write a 5-paragraph essay. I guarantee you that. If you think about the 4 or 5 interviews in your life that opened the door, what would your life have been like had those doors not been opened, had not remained closed? So when I talk to high school kids, and by the way, I do the same thing with people all the way up. I was working with a lady just the other day who is a PhD in psychology, and she was leaving a college in Massachusetts and going to another college. And she says, interviews terrifying. I said, well, we'll go through this. So these are important moments in your life, but every important conversation, the structure changes a little bit. There's less about tell me about yourself if you're doing an in-house presentation. Everybody knows about you, right? So you're going to move right into the body. What are the criteria that they're going to use to make the decision that I'm about to hope to influence? And then the closing question. And still questions, right? What good questions can we ask of the group so that we're all collectively involved? But those are the skills that I try to steer kids to recognize they need those skills more importantly than the ability to, text each other. They already know how to do that. Other questions? Yes?
Are you seeing a big change with the millennials who have a very different view of life as they're going into these interviews?
No. I'm seeing a very different view of life. I totally agree with you with millennials. And their experience is less individualized and more collaborative. So that's one of the things that they're actually pretty good at is collaborating. But they're not very good at communicating, oddly enough, particularly in any formal way at all. I'm not so sure that my generation was really good at it, frankly. But I think the millennials are getting worse, and the younger kids even worse than that. So, but in terms of, do they approach an interview differently? No. Because most of them are out there thinking that, well I just got to go in there and wing it because there's nothing I can do. And the guidance counselors are not telling them anything different than that. They continue to say, haircut, eye contact, smile, handshake, dress for success. Boom, that gets you through the chit-chat. Then comes the first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I was born, and then we struggle. Because that's the moment when we're most nervous. That's the moment when we're least likely to say the most important thing. And it's also the moment in which the interviewer is about to make the decision. I want this one. How do I get out of the rest of this interview?
Kristen, you had a quick question?
Yeah, really quick. You've got a pad on the back table there for something?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
Yes, I'm trying to enter the computer world myself. I brought just a little sign up for any of you who'd like to learn a little bit more about what I do in coaching people, or to just check out my website. A lot of this information is available on the website. Also, the feeds to all the social medias are on that as well. So if you give me your email, I will send you the information on the website. Also, I should put a couple of my business cards back there. I know that a lot of you are probably not at the point you're about ready to go out and do a job interview. I know that a lot of you
Life is unpredictable.
might very well be at the point where you're about to interview someone else. And that's the other part of what I do is I help interviewers figure out how to steer an interview so that you get the information right to make a good decision and not just hire the best golden shovel. You know what I mean? The person who can just dish it out, right? But then when you put them on the job, they don't deliver. So that's the other part. I do also figure that a lot of you, being influential people in this part of the state, know folks who need to go and interview. So please turn them on to my services. Okay? I hope that was helpful for everybody. Thank you.